But easily, the biggest media story of the week was right here in Australia. ABC boss slams opportunistic attempts to conflate BBC crisis with a Four Corners report. ABC News boss Justin Stevens wrote an email to staff suggesting that our reporting on his organisation's long list of editorial failures, well, it was all merely just an act of jealousy. So what has ruffled Stevens' feathers?
Let me take you to an ABC Four Corners report from February 2021, just a month after the Capitol Hill riot.
Such is the level of fear that in recent weeks, serious people here have been using the dread phrase civil war. If there's one thing that President Trump demonstrated in his final terrifying days in office, it's that these divided states remain vulnerable to an unscrupulous demagogue. Tonight, how a defeated, disgraced, and now twice impeached president brought US democracy to the brink of destruction.
Well, of course, that was my colleague, Chris Kenny, this week demonstrating that the ABC has been shamefully biased in its reporting of Donald Trump. Now, you might not like Trump, but describing him as an unscrupulous demagogue is not straight news reporting. It is firebrand opinion commentary. There is not one respected journalist who would possibly argue that this sort of language is appropriate in a news report, particularly one funded by the taxpayers with an obligation, a legal obligation to be impartial. But it gets so much worse than just the blatant bias that we've been forced to accept from the ABC. They doctored up this segment of Trump's speech to subtract nuance.
And after this, we're going to walk down and I'll be there with you.
Let's stop it there. They cut to the crowd shot there. That's known as a cutaway shot or overlay. When you show something else other than the speaker, you can then cut to a different part of the speech without seeing a jump. There's nothing wrong with that. It's done all the time, but it needs to be honest and fair. Let me show you what Trump actually said.
And after this, we're going to walk down and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down. Anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
The ABC spliced together two clips of Trump's speech to remove the part where he was talking about cheering on lawmakers. Now, I cannot see how anyone can watch that edit and argue that the meaning was not changed. When the reporter's prejudice is so visible that the subject is described as an unscrupulous demagogue, then they clearly feel emboldened and empowered to make edits like that. Now, we are owed an apology for this dodgy journalism, but this is what the ABC's news boss said about it. ABC boss Hugh Marks proud of Four Corners Trump takedown. Comparing the BBC's Panorama program to the ABC's Four Corners program is opportunistic and false. The BBC program spliced together two separate grabs from different sections of the speech President Donald Trump made during the day that occurred about 54 minutes apart, leading to the criticism that the program was misleading. Now, all of these clips we just played you, Hugh Marks is proud of them. Think about that. And for embattled news boss Justin Stevens, well, he went out swinging, attacking our journalism and claiming that he is a threat to us, which I did find very funny. Independent media represents a threat to commercial media, and our journalism causes grief for the powerful and vested interests. Now, that is the sort of arrogance which means an organisation will not change, cannot change ever. And the coalition needs to learn this lesson now. Well, joining me this week to discuss is Sky News contributor Kel Richards and Radio 2CC host Stephen Senatiempo. Well, let's start with you, Kel. What a week for the ABC. Justin Stevens has a track record of getting rather aggressive, writing letters. I see it as an act of intimidation. It's very funny, though, because it doesn't work. All it does is when somebody is trying to pressure me not to have an opinion that is, perhaps negative what they're doing.
It's obvious you're getting under his skin, isn't it? That's right. Can I say I'm disappointed in Hugh Marks in particular, and I'll tell you why. He started in March. 8 months later, he has gone native. Right, he has drunk the ABC Kool-Aid. He has forgotten the lessons of 30 years at the Nine Network of you look after the viewers. The responsibility is not to defend whoever has an opinion on your staff if their work is not as good as it could be. Your role is actually to think about the viewers and look after the viewers. Even the way he talked about the BBC made me wonder. He said the BBC's report was misleading. No, it wasn't. It was fraudulent. It was a conscious fraud perpetrated on BBC viewers to deceive them, to make them believe...
Yes, that's a good point. He said in his statement that it was misleading because the clips were 54 minutes apart. Now, that made it significantly worse, but it was misleading because it truncated the nuance and stitched together two separate parts.
Precisely. And it made Trump look as though he was urging violence when he was not. We're going to go on and cheer these people. So it was really deceptive, it's really dangerous, and we would really like a Director General of the ABC to do better than that. Not to just do the knee-jerk ABC, how dare anyone ever criticise us.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, let's bring you in here, mate. What did you make of this saga this week? I guess it's every organisation's right to push back if they feel that they're being unfairly attacked. But I think the language, particularly for a supposedly impartial news boss to say that it's opportunistic, the criticisms, when you've got Sarah Henderson calling for a Senate inquiry, it's inherently a political issue. And I don't know if the ABC, if it's really their place to determine what the coalition's policy is or isn't. The coalition, many people are publicly saying, we want to change the law. What business is it of the ABC if lawmakers do want to change the law?
Well, there's a couple of things to unpack there. The first thing I'm pointing is that Sarah Henderson is a former ABC journo. So if a former ABC journo was saying we need a Senate inquiry into this, we should all stand up and listen. But I want to echo what Kel had to say, is that Hugh Marks is the real problem here, because when Hugh Marks was in charge of the Nine Network, I wonder if he had the same opinion when Media Watch was going after his journos. This is the reality of it, that in commercial media, the Australian public don't have to pay to see what we've got to say if they don't want to. If we don't want to watch the ABC, we've still got to pay $1 billion a year for it. Now, I got no problem with opinion in the media. It's what I do every morning on my program. It's what we do after 5 p.m. here on Sky. But the difference between Sky and the ABC is at 5 o'clock, a caption comes up, opinion starts now. On the ABC, it's blended into what's supposed to be impartial journalism. But the difference again here is we don't have to pay for Sky if we don't want to. We do have to pay for the ABC, and we should be able to expect that our national broadcaster is going to tell it straight down the line. And once upon a time, the ABC did. But it's interesting to talk about Kel saying that Hugh Marks has gone native. I wonder if he's just woken up to the fact that the inmates have been running the asylum at the ABC for years now, and his position is untenable if he tries to take on the staff.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I do think it's impossible at this point to make change. They need law changes and structural changes. They're not going to do it themselves, because you've seen how they respond to criticism with threats and intimidation. But staying on the ABC, think about this. In the same week that Justin Stevens criticised our reporting and tried to intimidate us into stopping reporting on his organisation, he also had to apologise for this.
Moderates and Conservatives were quick to hose down any talk of a challenge. Their priority is sorting out the internal mess over climate policy. The party of Menzies is now deciding what it wants to be. Does it follow the Nationals and dump the net zero by 2050 emissions target, or stick with some sort of climate ambition to win back lost voters in the cities? On Wednesday, Liberal MPs will gather here in Canberra to thrash this out.
The federal coalition has again made itself the story.
You got to talk about the Liberal Party, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, they doctored that photo to make fun of Liberal Senator Jane Hume and Conservative politicians. Now, let's just take a minute to look at this photo side by side, because I just want to make a couple of points. Jane Hume held that picture up in Parliament last week to make the point that Albanese had broken key promises. It's about life being cheaper, etc. It's about Albanese being good, and she's held it up in Parliament. The ABC has superimposed Conservative politicians over the top to make fun of them with the voiceover. They're making it all about themselves. There was no pretense to it. There was no lead up. Let's bring the panel back in now to have a chat about this. But Kel, David Spears as well, who I do honestly think had no idea some dopey producer was doing this, he threw to this package with a straight face. And then their comms team came out and said, well, no, we were just trying to be satirical.
Yes, that's a really interesting defence, because either they are genre blind or they are actually playing a trick on the audience by switching genres at the last second without alerting them. I mean, Insiders comes from the News and Current Affairs Department. News does not make satire. Light entertainment makes satire. I mean, are they telling us that this is now a program in which they can do anything? David Spears will do a song and dance next week, or he'll do a stand-up comedy routine to begin them. Of course he won't. It's a news program. It's a serious news program. If you decide you're going to stick one satirical image in the middle of a news program, you're either trying to deceive people because you haven't said, this is not news, this is satire, folks, or you just don't know what you're doing. In this case, it was deceptive.
David Spears, the presenter, he's a good bloke.
Yes.
He would have been mortified that someone has done that, which is probably why they've gone and apologised. But, Stephen, let's bring you back in as well, because satire, it's really funny to me how there's only attempts to be satirical and mock people if they're perceived to be conservative. I never see this satire taking aim at a Teals MP.
No, well, that's right. But I guess the important point is there was satire that wasn't particularly funny. But the key point here is, and Kel's made this point, is that this wasn't the big gig, or it wasn't The Chaser or one of their satirical programs that, again, are not particularly funny. This was their flagship current affairs program, and their chief political reporter made to look like an idiot by having to throw to this package. Now, I just find it extraordinary. But the problem is people go, oh, well, it was a mistake of editing. And they've got form in this. I mean, the whole Heston Russell saga was a classic where they deliberately added in extra bullet shot sounds to make it appear that one of our most decorated soldiers was a war criminal. Now, he had to sue them for defamation, and quite rightly won, and good on him for that. But he should never have had to do that. And as somebody that, I went to radio school, we learned how to edit. It's a deliberate decision to edit things, particularly when you're putting up a picture of a front page of a newspaper that has been doctored to appear that it's something else. And then when you cut to a Liberal senator laughing as if he's mocking the same thing that's just gone up when it was a completely different issue. I mean, this was a deliberate decision of somebody within the editorial team at Insiders to put this so-called satirical package together in their flagship current affairs program. I mean, fair dinkum. Sky would not do that. Channel 9 would not do that. 7 wouldn't do it. Not even Channel 10 would do it.
And no one's been sacked, and the only thing that happened was an email went out saying how amazing there are. I mean, Justin Stevens did say we shouldn't have done the photo, it was a mistake, etc. But the whole point of that email that he sent to staff, it was very clear. It was to say that, no, this criticism of us is unfair. Yeah, which is extraordinary.
What happens in the staff-controlled collective Soviet, which is the ABC, and until that changes, nothing will change.
Well, he needs their support, doesn't he?
Yes,
and I would not be surprised if they replace him quite soon. But moving on, back to the BBC, the network has now apologised to Donald Trump.
Tonight, we're focusing on the breaking news that the BBC has apologised to President Trump over a documentary that spliced together parts of his speech on the day of the Capitol riots.
Stephen, let's bring you in. Very, very tough couple of weeks for the BBC. One thing that I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I found it rather extraordinary how people are saying, well, very similar to what Justin Stevens is saying, this is opportunistic. But really, they've put themselves in this position. And the only reason that we can criticise them is because that's the reality of the situation. And there now seems to be this push saying, oh, well, if you're criticising public broadcasting, you're trying to be censorious. It's some kind of, right-wing movement. What do you make of all that?
Well, I mean, we should be censorious. I mean, the BBC should be censorious of their own content. I thought it was extraordinary, the former head of the BBC, when he went out swinging, basically almost with a Donald Trump-like fight, fight, fight to his journos, don't give up, maintain the rage, etc. yes, he should defend his people. Every leader should defend his people. But when they make a mistake, you've got to call them out on it. You've got to call them to account and say, look, we got this wrong. Don't do it again. Not say, well, we got it wrong, but let's keep going. I mean, fair dinkum.
Yeah, such a good point. Well, moving on now to eSafety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant, who has charged taxpayers $425,000 to travel around the world. Gee, it's a good gig if you can get it. A Daily Telegraph investigation reveals that Miss Inman-Grant's travel schedule included visits to the United States, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Germany, France, Italy, Singapore, Japan, Belgium, Ireland, the Netherlands, etc., etc. These visits have involved meeting with leading tech companies, Apple, Google, Meta, OpenAI, as well as having dialogues with the United Nations, European Commission, the OECD. Now, Miss Inman-Grant also made 2 trips to Davos in the Swiss Alps for that infamous World Economic Forum in 2023 and another in 2024 at a combined cost of $51,741. Let's bring the panel back in. Gee, we love spending money, don't we? Julie Inman-Grant fascinates me for a lot of reasons. The remit that she's given is just so broad and she has just so much power. She acts almost as if she is this elected political figure representing our country. And this is a thing, a lot of people that may be in support of what she's trying to do with child protection and everything, some of the more noble aspects of the remit, which I do think that she's moved past. I don't think that they realise that she is out there making representations. I mean, on this show, we discussed text message she had with that advertising cartel that was trying to prevent Donald Trump from running again by pulling advertising spend away from conservative organisations. They've been shut down. It was a blackmailing effort. It was highly corrupt.
Yes.
She's friendly emailing this bloke trying to meet up with him on one of these trips, right? It seems to me wholly inappropriate, and it is a lot of money.
Yep. And look, the optics are not good. What it looks like, it looks as though she wants to build a global profile, a world profile. She's an American. Maybe, see, this is just me being cynical, maybe she would like to get an even better paid job, which is really important, back in the United States and leave the colony behind, because she's not treating us with any respect. She's a public servant. She's a bureaucrat. She was given the job of looking after Australian children online. She spent almost $500,000 on travel. Can she show us that every single one of those trips was helpful in defending Australian children?
That's such a good point. What is the accountability when you spend that?
Yes.
Who's responsible? It goes to the communications portfolio, which is Annika Wells, but they love her, so she just does whatever she wants. But look, Kel, Stephen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.